Hey everybody, welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. Thanks for tuning in. In just a second, you're going to hear my interview with Graham Farrar, who's one of the local leaders in the retail cannabis industry. We're going to talk everything related to the cannabis industry, his licenses, what he's doing in Isla Vista, Santa Ynez, the future of the industry. It's a really compelling, interesting interview. So we'll get to that in a moment. If this is the first time that you're tuning in, thanks a lot for checking out the podcast. My podcasts are available on all podcast platforms. So we're talking Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google, pretty much everywhere you find a podcast, and the video versions are available on YouTube. You can also find my podcast on my website, santabarbratalks.com, and check it out. You can get all the previous ones, and you can learn about Patreon opportunities for exclusive content there. I'm also really excited because my podcasts are now available at newshawk.com. They're all streaming there now. And so you can watch shorter versions of the podcast there. And I'm really excited about that. This is a really cool partnership. After you watch the beginning of the podcast or excerpts, please watch the full thing on my podcast platform. So I really appreciate it. This is a really cool time and opportunity for both Newshawk and Santa Barbara Talks. But let's dive right in. We are really going to have an interesting conversation with Graham Farrar. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's founded companies, software.com, Sonos. He's done a lot of stuff, and he's going to talk about the entire cannabis industry and everything that's going on with his licenses. So let's dive right in. And thanks for watching. Take care. Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's my pleasure today to be here with Graham Farrar, who is he's a lot of things, but he's a serial entrepreneur. He's one of the co-founders of Sonos. And, he's largely regarded as one of the champions, one of the kings, the golden boy of the local cannabis industry. And we're going to have a great conversation with him today. Graham Farrar, thanks for taking the time. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome, Josh. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it so much. I want to just sort of dive right in and sort of talk to you about what's going on with sort of the latest news with your company. You made some headlines recently talking about this. I'll let you explain it, but as I understand it, sort of this, you went public with your company. So can you talk about what that means in terms of the local cannabis operations that you have? Maybe you can clarify sort of the curiosity people have. What does this really mean? Graham Farrar goes public. So talk to me a little bit about it.
Yeah, sure. So we announced that we're going to go public. It will happen in June. It takes a little while for these transactions to finish. You got regulatory approvals, lots of government agencies and things like that have to approve everything. So kind of, I've been lucky here in Santa Barbara to actually have been involved in 2 prior IPOs. I was one of the early guys at software.com, for those who remember that, which went public back in the .com day. And then I was one of the, as you mentioned, the early guys at Sonos, which went public about 2 years ago. So, really very exciting, and, exciting for Santa Barbara, cause for celebration for the company, cause for celebration for the employees. So we're going to do that again for the 3rd time with Glasshouse. We are going public on the Canadian exchange because of the federal rules on cannabis, and some weird irony. Canadian companies can be listed on U.S. exchanges, but U.S. companies have to be listed on Canadian exchanges. So we will be going public in Canada. That doesn't mean that anything about us is Canadian. No more than when Sonos, Santa Barbara founded and headquartered company, went public on the New York Stock Exchange. It did not become a New York company. We're not becoming a Canadian company. Just our stock will be traded in Canada. We'll have no employees that are outside of California. There's no changes to the management. So, love me or hate me, I'm still the guy. Slapper kiss the cheek, whichever fits. The reason that we're doing it is to raise capital for growth. We have a strategy of wanting to create the biggest cannabis brands in California, and we think that what the rest of the country wants is brands from California. That appellation really matters. Kind of like champagne comes from France and tequila comes from Mexico, cannabis comes from California, and we're on a strategy to execute on that. So going public allows us 2 things. One is it raises capital. which we will then use to fund expansion on retail and build brands and additional supply chain and cultivation. And the other is it gives you a public company currency so that you can acquire other companies using stock as well as cash. So from the idea of taking, good brands and plugging them that exist and plugging them into our platform, it gives us a whole bunch of tools that we don't have as a private company.
Okay, so can you sort of maybe talk a little bit about the business side of that? Because there's this perception of, oh my goodness, Graham Farrar's company went public, so he's done, he's sold out, he's off in Hawaii, he's he's not going to be involved. What does this actually mean on the ground as a practical matter for all the various things that you're doing? Are you still going to be a Santa Barbara person, a California guy with your hands involved here?
Yeah, I mean, I have some of the reporting is reported as an acquisition, which it's not. So it is no, there's no selling out. There's no don't get to go to Hawaii and quit working. It actually just means more work. Really what it does is it allows us to expand, and expansion typically means more time, not less. There's literally zero changes to the management or our operations. I remain the president, remain on the board of directors. We still control the board. We still have majority shareholder vote. No employment changes at all happen as part of this transaction. It is just Glasshouse, better funded, better set up for expansion. So locally, it's not really going to mean much. Our cultivation operations don't change here. We have a couple new dispensary licenses that we can talk about, but not directly related to the transaction. So locally, it doesn't mean much. For Glasshouse, what it means is that you're going to see pharmacies in all other parts of California, and you're going to see expansion of manufacturing in places outside of Santa Barbara and expansions of cultivation outside of Santa Barbara. So really, we're setting ourselves up to build brands that can be dominant, cannabis brands that can be dominant in California, and then be poised that when the walls come down, which they look increasingly like they will sooner rather than later, we'll be able to take those, our brands national, right? So you probably don't have a favorite non-Mexican tequila, and many people don't have a favorite non-Californian cannabis brand. So we get a chance to know what people want. It's actually kind of funny. We have a free large focus group. It's called the Illicit Market, and it tells you what people want before they can have it. And what it tells us they want is California cannabis across the country, right? So if you go to New York and you find at this point illegal only stores there, so they're not following any of the rules, right? Like Florida has legal cannabis, it's closer to New York. Colorado has legal cannabis, it's been recreational longer than California. But those illegal bodegas don't stock their shelves with Florida or Colorado. They stock themselves with California because that's what the consumer wants. So first you win California, biggest cannabis market in the world, twice as big as the second largest, which is Colorado. Almost as big as the next three combined. So best single market to be in, but soon we think that market becomes the basis of a national market or across the rest of the country. So that's what we're setting up.
I'm blown away by the popularity of cannabis. I mean, I know that, I don't know why, from the time you're a child growing up, you always know people, they're like, they smoke marijuana, they smoke pot, they smoke cannabis. It was a quiet thing, it was not a big deal. But obviously we have these perceptions about what it is, what it means, what it does. But we've seen sort of almost a revolution in that. It is illegal federally, but locally, or California and in these states, we've seen this like billion-dollar industry erupt. Can you talk about? Let's just zero in on the pharmacy on Mission Street. Okay, so that was your first license here in Santa Barbara. Why is that place so popular? What is it about Graham's cannabis that makes people wait for a long time, snaking lines outside of the building? Can you talk to me about the popularity of it?
Yeah, well, and firstly, right, it's like the world's a better place with cannabis in it, and so the more access that people can get to it, the more they enjoy it, right? Like I think it's worth remembering that California's got a 26-year medically legal history with cannabis, right? So it has been here for a long time. Frankly, if you get down to it, California has a longer history with cannabis than it does with wine, right? So people have been buying cannabis since the price was going to jail. So that's how much they want and enjoy it in their lives. Now that price has gone down, hence the explosion and, more and more people finding beneficial ways to interact with it, right? Like, I think it's I always sometimes say that people who think they don't like cannabis just don't know how they like it yet. Sometimes that means that they've had an edible that wasn't labeled and they ate too much. Sometimes that means that they've smoked the wrong strain for them. Sometimes it means that they don't enjoy the psychoactive side, but a muscle balm that relieves their arthritis is great, or a bath bomb that, these things do not get you high at all, right? Or maybe it's a tincture to help you sleep, right? There's so many different ways. And one of the things that regulated cannabis has done is gotten us out of the 2 buds in a Ziploc approach, right? That's not all cannabis is now. At the pharmacy, we've got 150 different brands and 10 different categories: edibles and beverages and topicals and tinctures and flower and pre-rolls and joints, et cetera, right? With 600 different SKUs, 600 different products in there, right? Like, it's so far evolved and has so far to go still. But if you think about it, there's something that cannabis can do to benefit just about everybody in some way. Most of them, or many of them, have nothing to do with actually getting high, right? So that's the explosion. Then, cannabis has been illegal for less than 1% of the time that we've had relationships with it as a species. The natural state of a plant is not to be illegal. Like, that is, I think we need to remind ourselves that we're identical with nature, not on top of it, but part of it. It's not something that needs to be fixed. Cannabis is a plant, despite all the stigma and things that go along with it. It's roots and leaves and water and sunshine, just like any other plant. So it just happens to be one that works really well with our body. Our body has what's called an endocannabinoid system in it. It's for homeostasis, which is a fancy word for balance. And our body makes endogenous cannabinoids. Cannabis makes phytocannabinoids. It means cannabinoids from plants: THC, CBD, CBN, all those are examples. So it has a bunch of keys to locks in our body, many of which we know work. We don't necessarily know how it works. Again, federal bans and Schedule I drugs don't get to be researched, so you don't get to learn about them. Hopefully something that will end. But at the end of the day, there's lots of ways this plant can help our bodies to good ends. And, I sometimes remind people, just because it feels good doesn't mean it's not medicine, right? So we should keep that in mind. So the pharmacy, back to your question, sorry for my long soliloquy there, but the pharmacy was the first ever adult use dispensary in Santa Barbara. As a local boy who grew up here, it felt pretty good to get to put our names down in the history books for doing that. We won. It was a highly competitive process. It took us 4 years to get there. We were the first dispensary that opened. Will be 2 years in August, so coming up on that pretty soon. And it's been amazingly positive. There's been no friction, no static. The business neighbors like us. There's more traffic. Taffy's is selling more pizza. Daily Grind is selling more coffees. We literally have people, thank us for being there, because, well, for some it's enjoyable. I'm in that camp. I enjoy cannabis. Sometimes I use it to help me sleep, or a muscle rub, but I also just like smoking a joint because it's a feel good, healthier, alternative to alcohol. But a lot of people really use it as medicine. I still remember a story. I went to a restaurant right after we'd opened the pharmacy, and the lady behind the counter bought my lunch to thank me for opening the dispensary, because she used to have to drive to Port Hueneme once a week to get her medicine, and now she didn't, right? So that's the kind of positivity that we get from it. The market keeps growing, many new customers every week. COVID actually was a wind at our back, I guess, because it brought a lot of new consumers into the market. I used to call them, we've always had like the fun on Friday night consumer, but with COVID, we picked up the tincture on Tuesday consumer, right? So this is the kids came home for spring break a year ago and never left, or you've been watching the case count ticker and you can't sleep. So there's a whole new class of people that found out how cannabis can be beneficial. 420 that just happened, the unofficial, or actually maybe it's getting more official. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, tweeted out on 420 that it was a national holiday now. So that's always kind of been the cannabis thing, but we had record sales across all 4 of our stores. So, again, it shows that the market just keeps growing. And I think the pharmacy is our own microcosm of that.
Yeah. So now you're expanding in Santa Barbara County. You have licenses for Santa Ynez and Isla Vista. So can you talk to me about what that's going to look like? What is the timeline for that? And why did you target those markets?